Business problem. Many customers only purchase once and never return. And the business wants to understand what factors drive customer retention and how to increase repeat purchases. So the data set that I used was just called Online Retail, and it was donated on the 5th of November 2015. It originally had 514,000 data entries. However, I cut this down to 20,000 as it was easier to manage and still provided a similar level of accuracy. Um, so for demand and supply, if the elasticity is found to be between -1 and 0, it means that the demand is somewhat sensitive to price changes, and the demand elasticity was calculated to be minus 0.0068 with the use of a regression, meaning that customers are somewhat sensitive to price changes. However, the changes are not overwhelming. And the regression tells us that repeat customers are not sensitive to price. However, we have to look at other factors to gain a deeper understanding of the one-time customers. So for consumer choice relates to the churn of the business as the consumers are sensitive to price changes. So if a product is deemed too expensive by the customer, they will likely not have repeat purchases with the business. And the customer choice shows that small price increases won't directly affect their demand, as they have a strong perceived utility of the products since the demand is relatively inelastic. And from this information, it's gathered that the business should focus on loyalty programs and consistency with product quality, as well as a more personalized buying experience for each customer in order to lower churn rates and to sustain and improve the current utility that the business has for its products. And from the graph and histogram of the demand versus supply on the right side, it's seen that there is still a clear decrease in demand of one-time customers when the price of the product is increased, which further backs up the idea that the prices of the products that the business is selling will still influence the buying behavior of the customers. However, the influence is not overwhelming. So for summary statistics, from the summary of statistics, it's clear that the business is able to sell to multiple customer demographics with nearly 170,000 total sales in the span of just 2 weeks. And the average quantity of each order is 8.6, showing that the business is able to uphold repeat orders from customers. The average number of products purchased per customer is 35 in the 2 week period that is being analyzed. However, the mode number of orders per customer in the 2 week time frame is only one, meaning that on average, each customer only purchases from the business at most once in a minimum of 2 weeks and then never again. And what this shows is the products appear to have high utility to the customer. However, once the product arrives to the customer, they might decide that they can get better utility from another business, hence the low return purchase rate. The variance of the quantity is 807, which is fairly high compared to the average quantity purchased of 8.6, which could be a potential risk to the business as it means that there could be a high number of return orders for the business. And there are refund orders included in this data set, which emphasizes this point. This is also supported by the standard deviation of 28.4, showing that return orders are likely when compared to the average quantity purchased per product. So the regression analysis was used to determine the elasticity of the demand to investigate how much the demand of the products the business is selling is determined by the price of the products, as already discussed. The elasticity of the regression shows that the already repeat customers aren't sensitive to price changes, meaning that the pricing of the products is not the main cause of the higher churn rates. And the pivot table is used to analyze the purchasing behavior of on a customer basis instead of on a product basis. And this enabled the frequency of purchases per customer ID to be determined, which shows the recency and churn of customer purchases. The pivot table shows the number of purchases made by every customer ID in the last 2 business week span. And this pivot table also reveals that customers are only buying once in the 2 week time frame and then never again. So from the dashboard, we can see, so the charts are used to analyze the customer buying behavior through various time and geographic constraints, making it easier to break down where and when specifically customers are making purchases and the size of these purchases. From the date and quantity pivot chart on the right-hand side, it is seen that the majority of the business's sales are made by a small number of customers on only 1 or 2 days per fortnight. So specifically, the business had one customer order on the 1st and the 6th of December that was far greater than any other orders made that day. And this tells us that the consistency of the customers that the business is attracting is low, whereby the business is relying on only a handful of customers for the majority of their income. So as you can see, these three graphs on the right show that there was like a massive order here, massive order here, and this is like a normal day for the rest of the 2 weeks. And the geographic chart is used to determine the quantity of products that are being sent to each country. And the map can be used to show that UK has the highest demand for the products and is the main contributor to the business's income out of all the countries, depicted by the dark blue color. And the total demand for each price point can also be more accurately determined by the UK specific histogram and demand curve above the map of the UK. Considering that the business is making most of its sales from one country and from a select few customers, it shows that the business has a lower churn rate for low quantity purchases, meaning that the business is able to consistently make small sales. However, there is a high churn rate for the larger purchases, meaning that customers will make one-off large purchases and then never return to the business. Demand from other countries can be increased by making the storefront accessible in other languages and optimizing the storefront for international shoppers. So for employability, this report has improved my understanding and ability to use economic and consumer theory to apply to real-world data analytics. And through the use of customer supply and demand, consumer choice, and elasticity, I was able to gain an insight on the customer purchasing behaviors and apply this to predict what churn rates of the business may be and what specific factors it is being impacted by. The summary statistics, pivot tables, regression, charting, and dashboard tools were used to transform a raw data set into visual interpretations by identifying customer price sensitivity and locational constraints. And these skills have directly improved my employability in business and marketing analytics, as well as data analysis consultancy. And this is because employers value the ability to connect economic theory with real-world business decision-making. Overall, I've demonstrated my ability to produce quantitative market analysis and convey my insights clearly.